Right. Hello again, everyone. So what I've done, because of the tech problems that we had last night, I've re-recorded everything so that we don't have to put up with all the rubbish that was there in the beginning with the video issues that we had. So what we're going to look at today is gait. We're looking at normal canine gait, what gait is and what makes it up. And by the end of the session, what I'd like you to be able to walk away with is knowing or understanding the difference between the gait patterns that the dogs have, know what's involved in the different phases of a gait pattern, and knowing where you need to look to assess a dog's gait correctly and accurately as well. So what is gait? It's got a pretty easy definition. It's a matter of walking, stepping, or running. It's movement, basically. And the pattern that the pattern of movement that an individual produces at any particular speed is what we're going to define as gait. And what we've got to remember is that gait is not just about footfall, it's not just about limb movement, it starts with the whole body, and then we can break it down into individual legs, and then we can break it down into individual joints and segments. And it's any part of the body that's being used for locomotion. So when we're looking at these dogs, what do we need to be looking at? We need to start with the dog as a whole. We need to look at general body movement. Is it fluid? Does it have any huge deficits? Is the dog well balanced? Does he seem comfortable in the way he moves, or is there a limp? Is there an angulation or something turning out that we're not happy with? Once we've kind of looked at everything as a whole, we then need to look at segments of the body. So we're going to start, for me, I start at the head, and I want to look at head carriage. I want to look at the expression on the dog's face as well. Does he seem comfortable? Can he hold his head up high? Can he move it down low, side to side while he's moving, or is it very stiff and rigid somewhere? We're going to come through, obviously, into the neck, shoulders area. Is he moving symmetrically? Is there problems in that area? Is he really rigid? Is he coming to the back, thoracic area? Is it tight and not fluid and bouncing well? And then we'll be moving into the lumbar, back legs and tail area, and we're looking for exactly the same things again. How fluid is this dog moving? Is the tail, is he overusing his tail? Is he overstepping? Is he understepping? What's going on with it all? And once we've looked at this dog in segments, we're then going to start pinpointing each limb and break that down into segments as well. So now we're going to have a look at the joint on each one. The joint on each leg, you can have you can kind of break down the tail into a separate area as well, still, the head, and try to connect things together. Is the tail moving in tune with one of the back legs? Is the head moving in tune with one of the front legs? Is there a lot of excessive kind of lateral flexion coming in through the thoracic area? And basically anything else. Is something rolled out? Is there a stifle sticking out? Is there an elbow sticking out? Or is feet facing the same direction and same angulation as they hit the ground? Weight shifting, is he weight shifting flat through a foot or rolling to a lateral or medial aspect of it? These are all the things that we want to look at. And whilst it seems like a huge amount, kind of a bit overwhelming and you know, gosh, how am I going to see all this at once? We start with the little bits. And as we go through this, we're going to start with the small things and then build it up to the bigger and bigger picture with the dogs. So the first thing that we're going to look at is what makes gait up, and gait is made up of steps and strides. So we're going to have a look at a step cycle. So a quick few definitions for you. Step. One step includes the stance and swing phase of one foot on one limb. So when you're looking at a step, you're going to start with, say, the left hind, and you're going to look at that steps phase. You're then going to have a look at the opposite limb step phase, and then same on the front legs from one to the next as well. When you're looking at a stride is made up of two steps from opposite limbs. So it's either the forelimbs or the hind limbs that you're looking at, and we might start on the right hind, and we're going to look at that dog take a step from it, and then we're going to look at the step on the opposite leg on the left hind, and that makes up a stride. Our swing phase is when the foot is not in contact with the ground, so it's as if, again, we're dealing with one individual foot. That foot comes up off the ground, it's now in swing phase. And when it becomes in contact with the ground again, it's now going into stance phase. And to give a bit of an explanation, we've got this chap here. He's a human physio, and he's going to give some nice visuals and insight into looking at it all.
In this video, I'm going to talk about the basics of the gait cycle and gait analysis. Hi, and welcome back to Physio Tutors. Gait analysis can be part of your functional assessment. You will most likely choose to do a gait analysis when, for example, walking was one of your patient's specific complaints that you have recorded during history taking. When you do a gait analysis, it is wise to look at the patient from the front, the back, and the side. It can also be beneficial to record the gait analysis on video, to show it in slow motion, and to discuss your findings with your patient. So let's take a look.
Before we start getting into the analysis itself, let's talk about the gait cycle. We are going to focus on the right gait cycle, meaning we're going to follow the right leg during a full stride. We should begin by defining steps and strides. A step starts with the initial contact of one foot and ends with the initial contact of the other foot. A stride starts with the initial contact of one foot and ends with the next initial contact of that same foot. So it's made out of two steps. Now let's begin by looking at the two phases of the gait cycle. First, there's the stance phase. It accounts for 60% of the full gait cycle. During stance phase, the right foot is always in contact with the floor, hence the term stance. In the swing phase, which makes up 40% of the gait cycle, the right leg is, you guessed it, swinging. Now let's look a bit closer. During stance phase, the right leg has to complete different tasks. With the heel strike, the leg has to accept the weight of the body. This so-called loading response marks the first 10% of the gait cycle. The loading response ends once the contralateral foot lifts off the ground. We are now in single limb support. Here we can differentiate further. After load response, up until the point of heel off, we are in so-called mid stance. So far we have reached 30% of a full gait cycle. The heel of the right foot starts to lift while the contralateral leg has initial contact with the ground. This period is called terminal stance. We have reached 50% of the gait cycle and we are almost through stance phase. While the contralateral leg is proceeding to make full contact with the ground, the right leg lifts off further off the ground. This is the so-called pre-swing and we have reached 60% of the gait cycle. Stance phase is now complete and we start the swing phase. The only task now is right limb advancement until the next heel strike. We subdivide the swing phase into the initial swing from toe off until the feet are adjacent. We are now at 73% of the gait cycle. Following initial swing is a short period called mid-swing and it lasts until the tibia is vertical. We have reached 87% of the gait cycle. The last period, the so-called terminal swing, ends with the heel strike of the right leg. Take a look at this.
In this video, I'm going to...
Right, so what he's basically explained there is if we start with stance phase, I'm going to have a foot or a paw, for argument's sake, that's in contact with the ground. And that paw is going to come in contact with the ground from a slight caudal aspect. So the back of it's going to contact first. As the paw continues to contact in, it's going to start loading the majority of the weight through that limb. We're going to come into mid stance. The limb is now fully loaded. And so is that foot. So it's important at this stage that we're looking, how is that foot taking the weight? Is it still really flat and well balanced, or is he having to roll the weight to some other aspect of it? We'll continue to roll the weight through the foot, and the weight is now going to shift more to the front of it, to the cranial aspect, in through the toes, and then that paw is going to come off the ground. As it comes off the ground, we start to move to the swing phase. This is where the leg picks up a bit of acceleration to bring it forward, to swing it forward. Mid-swing, you're crossing over that contralateral limb, and terminal swing, that limb is slowing down, and we're coming back into an initial contact phase. As you're looking through all of these, you're not going to see this clearly without using slow motion video or some kind of app program or something to slow your video down. So it is important that we think about what technology we've got that we can be using to make our lives a bit easier to be analyzing movement and step. So now that you've got a bit of an idea what you're looking at, we need to know what do we need to make this as a most pleasant experience for us as possible, because I think a lot of people are a bit panicky and scared of gait almost. So to make it easy, we want an environment that's flat. Wherever you're going to mobilize a dog, it needs to be reasonably level, preferably not gravelly or anything that's going to slide or move underneath the dog. The dog needs to have enough space to move comfortably as well. The dog needs to be comfortable in the space. Not every dog's comfortable the first time they come into clinic, so your gait analysis may not be completely accurate, maybe the first 2 or 3 visits that you see the dog. We need an owner that can move at the speed that we need them to, and I need a dog that can walk or trot reasonably nicely on a lead. I don't need a dog that's dragging his owner or up on his back legs because everything's so tight and not working well. You can use a treadmill, but we can now alter these gaits and speeds depending what's going on with the dog. And it's not a true representation always of flexion extension, because the treadmill belt will move this dog's leg back for us a bit as well. And we need a bit of knowledge of breed-specific variations in gait and movement as well, because if we don't know that a certain breed has a certain little movement about it that maybe a different breed doesn't, we could clock that up as something that's a deficit or inaccurate for that dog. And most dogs have enough problems to begin with. We certainly don't need to be creating for them as well. When we start looking at this gait, ideally we're going to video it. Sometimes the owners will bring video to you as well. If they're going to bring video to you, you need to describe what kind of angle you need, because I get a lot of video sent to me. It's just the dog's bum. From kind of almost like a bird's eye diagonal view, I can see the dog's back and the dog's head, and I can't see its feet at all. So show them, always have a bit on your phone or on your iPad or whatever you use as an example that you can say, this is what it needs to look like. We're going to start with the dog as a whole, and we're going to look for the big major concerns. So is he really lame? Is he walking? Is he crabbing? Is he walking on a diagonal? Is there a leg that's not in place, not linear, not sticking out particularly well? Anything that really, you know those dogs, you can be driving down the street and start and look at a dog and go, my gosh, look at him. That's the kind of stuff you're looking for. Once we've got that, we're then going to look at each limb individually. So, and again, we're now looking, is everything linear? Are both the front legs moving the same? Are they symmetrical? Do they look the same? Are the feet placing? Are the steps and strides pretty symmetrical and even as well? We're going to do the same with the back legs. And then we're going to start with each joint on each individual limb as well. So now I want to know, are they flexing and extending the same? Are both the stifles in the same position? Does one roll out a bit? Does one roll in? Feet, how are they taking the weight? So on and so forth. And once you've got all of this stuff together, you've got the basis of your gait assessment for an individual dog. Now, before we start looking at our normal gait patterns, another thing that you can't be scared of is telling an owner that you come back to them with a bit of input on the dog's movement. You could spend an entire consult getting video, sitting there, analyzing it, looking at it, and giving the client a bit of feedback. I will quite often take my video and tell them that I'll look at it later on, because I've got an entire treatment session to get on with, and I don't want to waste it looking at the video. So don't be afraid to either tell them you'll drop them an email or you'll discuss it on the next session. If there's anything really, really horrible, then we'll bring it back a bit sooner than the next session. And don't forget as well that this is the point where you start bringing in your multidisciplinary team, because if there's things that you don't understand, if there's things that you don't know how it's impacting the body or how it's going to impact your treatment plan, this is where you need to get your physios, your osteos, your chiros, your hydros, whatever discipline you aren't, are the disciplines that we can go out to and ask and have a good chat with. And there's loads of Facebook groups, and you should have some local therapists, I would hope, that you're friendly with, that you could whiz a bit of video off to for someone to have a look at and put a bit of input in as well. I often find with my gait videos that I take, I will probably find 90% of what's wrong in that dog. And when I whiz it off to somebody else, I will find the other 10%. And that's fantastic. I don't particularly believe that any one person is going to find absolutely everything. We're all kind of trained in different ways. We have different interests. We have different experiences and background knowledge. And the things that we've got a visual library in our head of is what we're going to find. The ones that we don't are the ones that we might struggle a bit with. And that's where using and sending video to other people comes in handy. So Our normal gaits. Dog gaits are categorized into two groups: symmetrical, where each side of the body mirrors the other, and asymmetrical, where the movements are not mirrored on either side of the body. Our symmetrical gaits are the walk, amble, pace, and trot. They're the main ones that we tend to assess gait in. And then we've got our asymmetrical gaits, which are the canter and the gallop, and we will look at those today for the purpose of looking at gait. But unless you're dealing with a dog where the problem only presents in one of those gaits, or possibly a sporting dog, they're not normally a gait that we'd be assessing a patient in. So we'll start from slowest and work up to fastest. And our slowest gait is the walk. And your movement in a dog or a cat will always start with a hind limb. Dogs have a left and right preference, just as people do. So they will start with a hind limb, and then that movement goes to the front limb on the same side. And for lack of anything better for the slides today, we're always going to start on a left hind. So if I've got a dog that's in a proper walk, a correct walk, my left hind should pick up, and then as that left hind comes down, the left fore will pick up. As that comes down, the right hind, and then the right fore will follow as well. The rear foot should be landing just ahead of where the front limb is lifted from, providing we don't have any breed-specific alterations in there. And when walking, alternatively, you'll have 2 and then 3 feet on the ground, which is a good piece of information to take away because it makes it really clear whether or not you've got a walk or a walk or a pace. Because this is the only gait that's got 3 feet on the ground at any time. So we've got this chap here. He's going to do a bit of walking for us. And you can see we've got back leg, front leg, back leg, front leg, working from either the left or the right side, whichever way you're working from. He looks like he's moving easy. We'll just look at these guys as a whole at the moment. So he looks like he's got easy movement. Nothing's kind of crashing down really hard. We can see that he can move his head around while he's walking. His tail's not pulling drastically to one side either. Is his gait perfect? It's probably not, but at the moment, for the purpose of what we're doing, we're looking at the patterns themselves, and his walking pattern, he has a good walking pattern in there. Your amble is exactly the same gait pattern as a walk, it's just a fast walk. It is a normal gait pattern, but it's not one that most dogs prefer. It can sometimes look like a pacing gait if they're moving quite quick. They will tend to use this gait when they're tired, but they want to move quickly. Maybe they can't trot. Possibly they've got a pain issue or a poor fitness level that's preventing a dog from trotting. They might amble. It uses different muscle groups than a trot would, so it can avoid that diagonal kind of pivot balance that a trot brings in. And it's important to be able to know whether or not you've got a pace or an amble. And this is where your slow motion video comes in. So again, we can see back foot is going down before the front foot quite consistently with this dog. And then we'll look at a pacing gait in a second, and you should be able to see the difference. And if you look at, if you compare this gait to the previous one, to the walk gait, he's got a lot more movement. You can really see him driving through that back end. He's moving quite hard, quite quickly, and using a lot more energy than that walk ever required him to use. The head's involved, a lot more head involvement, pulling up and down a bit with his movement. There's a lot of energy being used to create this movement for this dog. I believe he breaks into a bit of a trot shortly. Yeah, there he goes. So he couldn't hold that particularly long. So with a pace, both limbs on the same side of the body moved forward together. So you've only ever got 2 feet on the ground. So left hind, left fore are going to move together, pick up off the ground at the same point more or less, and move together and make contact with the ground again. And then the right fore and right hind are going to repeat exactly the same movement. And in this gait, as opposed to the dog's center of gravity moving from the back legs up through the back into the front limbs, the center of gravity shifts left to right. And this wastes an enormous amount of energy for the dog. It makes it more difficult for them to maintain balance. And the center of gravity is completely off center for these dogs as well. This is always an interesting question. Why might they pace? Not all breeds are penalized in the show ring for pacing. A lot of Mollisser breeds, carriage dogs, some sheep dogs are all bred to pace. And when you look through the types of dogs that have this genetic predisposition to pacing, they tend to be either very heavy breeds, carrying a lot of muscle weight on them, such as your Mastiffs, or dogs that are bred to need to remain on their feet for a long time. So again, your sheep dogs, your Dalmatians, a lot of air scenting gun dogs as well. So there's some kind of an evolutionary reason for this. We're not exactly 100% sure what it is, but we are becoming more comfortable with the idea that if a young dog comes to us, let's say a young Bordeaux Mastiff comes to me, 4 or 5 months of age, and the owner's saying that he's pacing and we need to train him out of this, I'm probably not going to do that. I'm going to take, obviously, a history. I'm going to rule out any medical issues, any pain issues. But if I've just got a young Mastiff breed and the owner's going to tell me this dog is paced from the day it learned to walk, then I'm probably not going to interfere with that because I've got a genetic predisposition. However, we can also force a dog into a pace as well. And quite often poor lead training, where you've got a situation where we inadvertently force the dog to walk at a speed that's not a walk and not a trot, and they can't really amble, they will often pick up a pace and gait. And that's on us for doing that. And sometimes we need to be able to have an owner give a dog a bit more lead, take them off lead, let them move around a treatment room so that we can actually determine, is this a training issue? Is this a piece of equipment that's causing a bit of discomfort? Or do we have a bigger problem, underlying medical problem or a genetic issue for the pacing? You can have physical problems that prevent a trot. Pain is a big one. Elbow problems, hip problems, all kinds of different physical issues, and including internal problems as well. If I've got a dog, I've seen many that have stomach problems, GI problems, pancreatic problems. A lot of these dogs will pace during flare-ups as well. So again, a thorough medical history is pretty important. And just from the perspective of retraining these gaits, you're looking at a person to retrain muscle memory after an injury and them developing a poor gait pattern. They tend to suggest that you're looking to 6 to 8 weeks of daily training of 10 to 15 minutes a day to retrain a pacing gait. Now that's in a person that would be working that way. We've kind of extrapolated that over to the dog world to train out specifically pacing gaits back into walking and trotting. And what we tend to end up doing is actually encouraging a trotting gait because we want the dogs just to move quicker. But before you do any of that, again, I'd be looking to the multidisciplinary team for a really good assessment of the dog to make sure that we should be taking this dog out of a pacing gait in the first place and that we don't have an underlying pain or physical problem. So here's our pacing gait. I think she's a bit intermittent with it in the video, but here we go. So you've got 2 feet on the same side, lifting up at the same time and placing at the same time. If you remember with the walk and the amble, at some point you'll go 2 legs and then 3 legs on the ground. With the pace, we only ever have 2 legs and they're on the same side of the body. Another way, I've got another pacing video that you'll have a look at in a second that kind of gives an idea of the weight shift. So she's come out of that pace briefly here now, and she has swapped into a walk, which is good. Some dogs, when you first treadmill them, they will pace because they struggle with the resistance, the buoyancy of the water. This particular dog, she only had a tendency to pace in the treadmill. On land, she walked properly, and I went through tons of video with my owners to make sure that they were accurate in what they were telling me with her gait movement as well. She initially came because she damaged a disc through bouncing at squirrels in the garden by window by like a set of French doors, and she will probably, to a degree, possibly intermittently pace here and there, and we were able to narrow the pacing down specifically to treadmill. Water treadmill work, land treadmill, she did not pace. And if the owners overdid it a bit, so if they fatigued her too much, or if they did a lot of uphill kind of walking, her owners were quite active. And what we kind of determined from that was that she would pace when a bit of pain or discomfort set in. And it's very likely that the buoyancy from the water in the treadmill would actually kind of push her into using her lumbar muscles a bit more and her back end a bit more, and it was uncomfortable for her. So at times you may need to evaluate your treadmill cases if they're pacing and whether or not they should or shouldn't be in a pool. But again, you know, each dog has to be considered an individual. Just because it's pacing in a treadmill doesn't mean it's a good pool candidate, and or vice versa. So you need to look at that. And again, multidisciplinary team coming in to offer other options of what can be done is often quite useful. So here she is again, same dog, pacing from above, and you can see this side to side, this left to right shift of her body weight. So now instead of the drive and the energy coming up from the back legs and through the back and into the front, we're sending it side to side, which is a huge amount of wasted energy. And whilst it's not particularly clear for those of you that use treadmill or get video from hydros and whatnot, you can kind of see the water start splashing up and down the sides of the tank because the movement from the dog really impacts the flow of the water in the tank. So it's quite easy to pick a pacer out in a treadmill tank. Our trot, and this is probably our best gait to be picking up lameness in, because your forelimb and your hind limb are never assisted in weight bearing by the opposite limb to them, by the contralateral limb. So this basically produces a degree of instability in the dog and makes any head nods and poor pelvic movement more noticeable. And it's still slow enough, it's a slow enough gait that we can still keep up with it visually without necessarily the need for video, but video will pick up all the small things, all the little bits that our eyes might miss. With the trot, each diagonal limb is moving forward at the same time and strikes the ground at the same time. In some breeds, such as your German Shepherds, extreme angulation in the hindquarters might cause a need for support, which will result in one of the front limbs remaining on the ground, where other breeds would have that limb in a swing phase. They might maintain it into a stance phase a bit longer. So there's a breed-specific change that you need to keep in mind. And when trotting, your pelvic limb, your pelvic limb should be stepping forward into the spot where the front foot on the same side entered the swing phase a moment before. So basically, as your back foot comes forward, it should track up into the spot where the front foot was. But again, there are breed differences that will mean that won't happen for every single dog. So a lot of your short-legged dogs, your Dachshunds, your Shih Tzus, your Lhasas, your Bassets, they're not going to be able to track up properly as we would expect a dog in a trot to. And a good trotting stride is going to bring that front limb extension to just under the dog's nose, and the rear limb should have an equal amount of extension as the front one from the hip. And that again does fall under a breed specific difference, and we'll be looking at those towards the end of the session. So here's our guy trotting. He's avoiding that trot, and you can see he's not tracking up, and that is going to be a bit of a breed specific difference. If he overreached on those back legs to bring him forward, it's going to reduce his stability. And with him being a Malamute, a sled breed, it would have made it difficult for him to be pulling a heavy load and be overreaching with those back legs so much. So they do have a slightly shorter stance on it. So again, knowing what breed you're dealing with can be quite important. And then overall, globally, he's moving quite easily. He's got a lovely bounce in him, lovely bit of movement coming in through his back. His tail's moving nicely. He's got good head carriage. He can hold his head high and move it a bit side to side, which tells me he's got quite good balance. He's not having to hold himself really rigid or stiff to maintain that position. for the purpose of the canter and the gallop, we're going to have a very quick look at them. But we've got a couple of problems. A, it's not a symmetrical gait for assessment. B, the speed and the movement of the gait makes it very difficult to identify concerns quite often. And C, most of us don't have the room to put these dogs into a canter or a gallop to be assessing them that way as well. So as I said before, the only time that I'm going to ask an owner to bring me footage, or that I'm going to want to see a dog in either of these, is if this is where the concern is noted. So if an owner comes and says, you know, every time he gallops, his leg kicks out, then I'm going to have a look at this dog in a gallop. Or if I've got a sporting dog, because it's more common that they're going to be moving at a cantering or gallop pace. So my agility dogs, flyball dogs, IPO, are your main sports, frisbee as well, where you're going to have these dogs moving in these faster gait patterns. Your canter is quite a complex gait movement, and there are two types. There's a rotary and a transfer. Dogs will tend to run in a rotary canter and horses in a transfer. And the rotary canter gives the dog, it gives it a real rolling appearance when you look at it, particularly from behind. And we've got two bits of video. This one's going to compare a canter and a gallop for you, and then we're going to look at a gallop as an individual gait as well. So we've got this poodle here, and he's coming in a canter at the moment, and you can see back legs are coming in and replacing the front legs. We don't have a huge amount of full extension. We have, you know, front legs go out, back legs go out, everything kind of collects back in underneath. But you should see a very different type of extension coming forward when this dog switches into the gallop. So now you can see that your front and your back legs should be opening up together. Everything comes in and collects together and opens up together. And ideally, these dogs shouldn't be bunny hopping. The hind limbs, one foot should contact the ground just before the other. If we've got both hind limbs coming down, then we've got a support issue, and that dog is bringing them both down together to create additional support somewhere for the back end, lower back, somewhere like that. And then we've got our gallop. So with galloping, dogs that tend not to gallop, again, it's a good reason to be looking for spinal issues, hip issues, hind limb issues, because they've really got to flex and open that spine up to achieve a galloping gait and mobility throughout the whole body. So basically what happens in a gallop is the dog will, your pelvic legs come down, they strike the ground one at a time, one foot slightly ahead of each other. The dog then pushes off with those limbs, extends its spine out, and reaches forward with the front limbs. You'll have a moment of suspension as the dog's propelling through the air, and then those front legs come down, one slightly ahead of the other. Front legs are pulled under the body, pushed off the ground, and we now have a second period of suspension as well. And this greyhound gives a really good example of it. He's got a very clear double suspension period, which most sight hounds do. And it's also really useful, this video, because it's lovely slow motion, to be having a look at the degree of angulation coming through the carpal and hock joints, and the kind of contact that's coming into the ground with them. And it has some nice music as well. So there's one period of suspension, and then we've got one leg in front of the other. Second period of suspension, and the same again, one leg in front of the other. There we go. So those are your normal gaits. Video them, make use of them. Every dog that comes in, do a bit of a gait analysis on it, particularly if you're a land-based or a treadmill user. Get familiar with them. You should be able to, for the most part, be able to glance at a dog and know what gait it's in. I'm not saying that you should be able to analyze that gait. Is it moving well? but you should be able to look and go, that dog's trotting, that dog's walking, that dog's ambling, pacing, whatever. You shouldn't kind of have to sit and try and figure out what gait a dog is in. If you do, then you just need to spend a bit more time. And it might be that you need to go in and shadow someone. Go find a treadmill user, go find a physio or an osteo, somebody that does a lot of gait assessment day in and day out, and just get them to take you through this process time and time again, because it's one thing to sit and look at this stuff on a bit of video, and it's completely different when you've got the pressure of an owner, pressure of a time-limited consultation as well, and trying to look at this dog, different breeds, every other hour or so coming into the clinic as well, and figure out what's going on. So the last bit that we're going to have a little look at, and we're touching on this briefly because there's so many breeds out there, and there's so many different breed-specific considerations that we need to have. So my goal for today is to kind of give you guys that insight to be looking outside of the box and start thinking a bit differently about some of the gait movements that we see. So breed-specific wise, dogs, most dogs, not all dogs, most dogs should be able to trot with a balanced reach and drive. And reach represents the extension of the forelimbs, and drive is going to represent the extension of the hind limbs. Now, all of this comes out of the show world. So it's something we've got this data and this feedback and instruction coming out of the majority of your kennel clubs around the world. And they will kind of suggest that the dog should have a normal reach and drive, or an overreach and drive, or underreach and drive. And this is what we're looking for in these breed specifics when it comes down to this. For balanced movement, we require the degree of reach to equal the degree of drive. So whatever amount a hind limb extends out, my forelimb should be able and capable of extending the same. If it can't, then I've got to figure out which leg I've got a problem in. Just because one's shorter doesn't mean it's that one. It could be one is overreaching, and the one that's actually coming up a bit short is representing normal movement for that breed. Conformation plays an enormous role in these breed specifics as well. So for a square-shaped dog, if you will, our desirable range of reach is for the forelimb to extend under the dog's nose. And here's an image of that here for you. We've got a Rottweiler on the show ring, marking out his reach and his drive. And that reach and drive, if you kind of look at your angulation of the limbs, is coming more or less from the center of the body, which is what we want it to do. And he's got his reach out to his nose. So if I had a Rottweiler or Dalmatian, Weimaraner type dogs, even your smaller, some of your smaller spaniels, some spaniels have a bit of a rolling gait to them. Some of them have a nice balanced reach and drive as well, though. I'm going to start looking at how far is this dog able to reach, and can both his front legs reach the same? Do both his back legs reach the same? And do I have a balance between my back and my hind limb and my forelimb extension? And if I don't, then I've got to start looking for why not. That's just a bit of a reminder slide. And here we've got a Bracco Italiano, and these guys are bred to overreach. So you can see this really extensive extension on the hind limbs. I've marked his nose with a little red line there as well, and probably from just above the paw, around the carpal joint, he is overreaching past his nose. Now these guys are bred that way. That is more than acceptable in the show ring. It doesn't mean that he's got a problem anywhere, but it does mean that we need to be aware that this is how a Bracco moves. Otherwise, I could be looking at that and thinking, gosh, you know, he's overreaching a lot. Why is he doing this? So other things that I want to be looking at is, does he look like he's moving easy? This image is representing a pretty easy movement for this dog. You know, he looks comfortable. His head is high. His tail's well balanced. He's got some nice foot shape and placement in there. Doesn't seem to be weight shifting particularly. So all those things as well will kind of suggest to me, maybe I'm dealing with a breed specific problem. This dog looks really comfortable the way that it's moving. I need to go off and do a bit of research about this, or possibly ask the owner. You know, if you've got an owner that has a bit of a unique or a rare breed, they usually know quite a bit about them. And if they don't, they can put you in touch with someone that does. And another really good resource for breed specifics can be your breed rescues. A lot of the people involved in breed specific rescue used to breed the breed at once. And because it's rescue, they see breeds from all sorts of breeders. So they'll see very well-bred dogs down to very poorly bred conformed dogs as well. So they would actually be able to probably give a lot of insight into good and bad movement. The other place that you can go is to a dog show, to a Kennel Club registered dog show. Pick your breeds and spend an afternoon watching them move around the ring. So these guys are chows. They have an under reach and an under angulation due to the way that they angulate through their hock joint. So again, his nose is marked with a red line there, and you've got a good kind of probably 1.5 inches, 2 inches there, where he's coming up short on his extension, and he is in a trot. And this is something that we would only consider in a trot. In a walk, we're going to be looking more at step, stride, kind of distances between the two as opposed to necessarily reach and drive. Aside from the reach and drive, we also need to look at different types of forelimb movement. So this guy's an Italian Greyhound, and quite often your Whippets and your little Italian Greyhounds will have a high stepping forelimb. Not necessarily seen on the back limb because I don't actually flex the stifles as much. And this high stepping front end gait is due to that reduced stifle flexion that you see in the breed. So knowing this can be really, really useful because you don't want to kind of think, gosh, half the dog is moving really kind of over exaggerated almost, and the other half isn't. Why not? Not why not, but how come is what we need to find out. Is it a breed thing or is it not? If I've got both limbs at one end of the dog, front or back, moving very symmetrical, again, I'm going to assume it's more of a breed specific thing than potentially a conformation. But what I'm going to need to do is go off and look at what a really good show ring dog looks like versus a poorly bred one. Because there could still be issues, even though they're both looking reasonably symmetrical, they may not be moving the way that they should do in the show ring. So I now need to kind of compare the dog in front of me off to a dog that's moving really, really well and make a decision. Is this dog moving really well for the breed, or is he not moving as well as he could be? And our Hackney gait, to the best of my knowledge, and I could be wrong, the miniature pinchers, which is what this chap is the only breed to produce a Hackney gait. And that Hackney gait is defined with that high stepping, lots of flexion through the hip and knee and through the elbow and shoulder to bring that really high stepping gait in. So again, if I've got a miniature pincher in front of me that isn't moving like that, I've now got to make a decision. Is he not holding a strong show line? Because I would assume that as I move away from my show lines and maybe into working lines, that gait may not be as strong. Is he poorly conformed? Is his back too long? Is his shoulder angulation or something like that not correct and preventing this high gait? Or do I have an underlying medical problem that's going to impede him being able to do this as well? And again, I can't stress it enough. Your multidisciplinary team has a huge impact in situations like this to help all of us figure out what's going on. So, as a summary, for you to be able to assess canine gait, you need to know what normal looks like. And in addition to knowing what normal looks like, we need to know what breed-specific influences may or may not exist. And if there are breed-specific influences, we need to know how strong they are in any individual dog. Using video is an absolutely fantastic way to be dealing with gait. Not only does it aid your observations, but it's going to allow you to build up a library of video for your own experience and for reference. If I've got video of 15 Rottweilers, I can go back and think, those 15 moved really well, and this one in front of me today doesn't look that great. I'm never going to be pressured to give a client an answer then and there, but I am always going to be honest with them. I'm not going to lie and make something up. I'm just going to tell them, I need time, or I don't know. Clients are happier with us when we honestly say, I don't know, but I'll find out, as opposed to feeding them a line that may or may not be completely accurate. And we need to remember as well that gait's not just about the dog as a whole. It's the dog, its individual limbs, and its individual joints on all its legs. So that's it for this series. This was the first in a series of 3 on gait. We're going to be working next week, same time, same place, hopefully with no tech problems, on postural assessment of the dog. And then the week after that, we'll be looking at dynamic assessment. And collectively, knowing your normal gait, knowing your postural assessment, and then looking at your movement is how you manage your gait assessment. So fingers crossed, everybody enjoyed tonight, and I'll see you guys next week.